Andy Johnson, Minnesota State University. We are looking at emotions, motivations, and learning to read. Emotions, I believe, are one of the most significant variables in that affects students, especially students with reading difficulties or learning difficulties. Defining our terms, it's a physiological response, actions, tendencies, and subjective feelings that adaptively engage humans and other animals to react to events of a biological and or individual significance. Responses, that means it's a physiological response that animals and humans do. Actions, it gets us to do something, and tendencies, it creates a disposition or a tendency to think and act, and our emotions have evolved significantly through the years. So emotions are physiological changes within us that promote survival behavior. We have to think about cave people and how emotions came to be and helped us survive in order to understand them. There are 6 basic emotions: anger, fear, surprise, sadness, happiness, and joy. And these are the basic. The others, they're like primary colors because the complex emotions are variations on this basic emotion. They have been socially learned and culturally shaped. Now, emotions are not always accessible to consciousness, especially children who don't have the frontal lobes fully developed to analyze them, and especially adolescents as well. We think because cognitively they have much of the brain power that they understand the internal self, but that is not always the case. Defining our terms, emotions, they are short-lived, 15 seconds, and they're gone unless we, of course, think about it. Why are they only 15 seconds? Again, think of survival. Emotions prompted us to do something. Back in the caveman, if he felt fear, he tensed up and needed to act. But if he felt that all the time, he wouldn't have the cognitive space to think and perceive. So from an evolutionary perspective, our emotions serve us best if they are short-lived. Emotions are, our moods are emotional states that endure longer. These are called moods, and these are often triggered without antecedent events or thoughts. Moods engage other cognitive operations to sustain this internal state. That means we have to think about it. Memories come up and cause us to think. And by the way, we can create our own moods as well by continuing to think about the bad things or the negative things. We have a choice. Beware of the second arrow. The first arrow is the bad thing that happens. The second arrow is every time you go back and think about it, you feel pain again and again. We have a choice as to what movie in our heads we want to watch. If someone hurts you, that's fine, but you have to be able to let it go so you aren't harmed by the second arrow. Something else, diet, chemical composition affects our moods, both by what we eat and what we don't eat. There's certain sorts of foods that have more of a common calming effect, and we'll talk about that in another video. Affect technically is the outward expression of emotions. People usually think of it in terms of facial expression, but it's body and voice inflection and hands and everything else. Temperament is our disposition. We are predisposed to think, to respond to experience, interpret things in certain ways. And you see a whole bunch of different temperaments here. These are genetically endowed. Our experience plus genetic factors create temperament, meaning that yes, we are genetically endowed to focus, to experience the world in a certain way, but our experience wires us. That plus genetic factors creates our temperament. Remember, as we act upon the world acts upon us. Everything we see and experiences changes the wiring a little bit, helps develop neural pathways and create new neural networks. When does a learning disability turn into an emotional behavioral disorder? I see this at the center a lot of times. Learning disorder for many years, and all of a sudden we see these behavior pop up, and we see kids labeled as behavioral disorders, EBD. However, sometimes a negative reaction acting out physically is a positive response to a negative situation. If learners have been frustrated and they experience failure for 6 or 7 years, it's only natural that they are going to act out. This does not excuse negative behavior, but it helps us understand. And in our special ed programs, we tend to deal with behaviors a lot. The EBD stands for emotions as well as behavior. Emotions cause the behavior. We tend to treat our children, especially children with emotional and behavioral disorders, in the same way we treat rats in a Skinner's box. We offer rewards and pellets in order to shape behaviors. It is very important that we attend to the emotional and motivation dimensions of reading. And again, I will show you how emotion affects memory, perception, and our ability to learn. Our children have lots of emotions, a negative one usually, children with reading difficulties, because they failed. It's important that we create these no-fail zones, that they can experience success. This is the importance of the zone of proximal development, which is the zone above the independent level, but below the frustration level, where students can succeed with teachers' help. We call that scaffolding. And you'll hear that a lot in our reading experiences, our reading instruction for students with reading difficulties. We create scaffolding so that they can successfully engage in authentic literacy activities. Here's a theory I'll put forth to you. There are more educational disorders than emotional behavioral disorders. You don't have to agree with that, but I think a lot of what we see as behavioral disorders are students responding to negative educational situations. This is the end of part 1.